you need to have a golden gut. You need to actually go with your gut. And yes, everybody can give you the data, and you should take the data, and you should get the understanding, and you should understand all the good, the bad, and the ugly. But at the end of the day, your gut's going to tell you whether you should do it or not.
Welcome back to the deal. I'm Jason Kelly alongside Alex Rodriguez. We are so excited to have David Levy with us. He is the CEO, co-founder of Horizon Sports and Experiences, has an incredible history and legacy in the media world. David, Alex and I talk about this stuff all the time. We're heading into March Madness. It's the perfect time to talk with you because you're the architect of so many big deals. First of all, just great to see you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Now, thank you both, Alex and Jason. Happy to be here.
All right, let's talk about March Madness because Alex and I are both huge college basketball fans. You and I have some beef, Georgetown versus Syracuse, but you're clearly winning that battle.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't know anymore these days, but yes, we do have a slight advantage over the years.
Yes, exactly. But talk to us about March Madness and the media side of it, because you were the architect of a deal that probably stands as one of the most seminal in the sports media landscape, where you get two competitors together in a way that really elevates what we see on TV. So give us the backstory there.
Yeah, this was a landmark deal that I don't think will ever be replicated again. Um, it was taking two different media companies with very, very different cultures and combining them to form one company or one opportunity to showcase this incredible event.
So you're talking about Turner where you were and CBS, just to
Yeah.
set the table.
Yes. And it was a bunch of different circumstances that led to this incredible deal. And Sean McManus, who was the architect on the other side of this equation. What was happening at CBS at the time, they were at the eighth year of an 11-year deal that at that moment in time, they were not making money from. And in fact, they were trying to figure out a way to possibly drop March Madness from CBS. And that was more
Wow.
corporate. That was more corporate than I would say Sean and the CBS sports team who love and breathe that product. He was getting down to maybe money making decisions. At the same time, March Madness, the NCAA was interested to thinking about maybe expanding to 96 teams. And they were out in the marketplace, sort of seeing were there any other opportunities to get the other side or the incremental games on top of what CBS was doing. And that's when I got a call from Greg Shaheen, who at the time was representing the NCAA, seeing if Turner had any interest in the property. And since CBS was sort of in this unusual stage of should we keep it, should we not keep it, Sean and I sat together and said, listen, is there an opportunity for us to do this together? And my first comment to Sean was, listen, as long as that's not a cable deal for Turner and a broadcast, and you got to go back into the early 90s and 2000s. This was actually 2000. This deal was struck in 2010. The first year we aired it was 2011. Back then, there were a lot of deals that were called cable deals versus broadcast deals, where cable would
Yeah.
get the early rounds and broadcast would get the finals and semifinals, or cable would get Thursday, Friday golf, and the broadcast would get Saturday and Sundays. And I said, we're not going in that way, Sean. If we're going in, we're going 50-50, meaning that Turner will air the semifinals and finals every other year or something of that nature. And he totally got it. He said, I get it, because he wanted to keep it with CBS and he knew without a partner, he wouldn't have gotten it done. And I knew I needed CBS because I don't think I would have gotten the NCAA to put all the games on Turner and not have any broadcast coverage. So there was a win-win on both sides. And then we had to sit down and talk about sharing talent, broadcast talent.
Mm.
Was Charles Barkley and Ernie and Kenny going to be able to be on the air? And then we had to think about the broadcast trucks, right? And union versus non-union trucks. It was a very complex deal that in the end, the most important thing that Sean and I said from the beginning was we need to think of the consumer first. Because prior to that, 2010, okay, and before that, CBS did regionals. That means if you were on the West Coast, you saw the
Right.
games that CBS thought you wanted to see, And if you were on the East Coast, they did the games at the East Coast they thought they wanted to see. And the idea that we pitched to the NCAA, which obviously worked, which was let's air all the games on all different channels, which is unheard of. And at some point, Jim Nance had to say, we have a blowout game here on CBS. Go to True TV and watch this. It's going into overtime. Syracuse versus Georgetown, so to speak, right? But we were telling people to leave one channel, which is unheard of, and the reason was because all the money was pooled under one umbrella and split evenly.
That's incredible. I mean, David, I was telling Jason off air that I remember how confusing that was because you had Grant Hill, you had all these broadcasters. I've never seen that before. It's truly groundbreaking. But, Adam Silver once said that, David Levy is a media executive, basically wizard and a visionary, right? I'm paraphrasing a little bit. And you're synonymous with big deals and big, big superstars, whether the Shaq, right? Was this something that you had from day one? The ability to put deals together and attract the best talent in the world to come work for you?
I was dealing with negotiations at a very young age, whether it was working in flea markets or whether it was working, I played club hockey at Syracuse and had to go raise money for the club hockey team and always trying to deal with organizations and people. Um, but no, I didn't realize where I was going to end up. I started out an advertising agency called SSC&B and worked and figured out very quickly that being on the ad side wasn't going to make as much money if I was on the sales side. And so, I got on the sales side very quickly and was hired by Ted Turner in 1987 and
Oh
stayed
my
with Turner
God.
Broadcasting for 33 years. I left in 2019 with many different jobs. Obviously, one of them being the president of Turner Sports. So, you know, being in that uprising cable days, when Ted used to say, cable is cool. And then, Ted having the vision, to be honest with you, to buy the first NFL Sunday night package, which launched TNT. Working with David Stern in the NBA, we had the NBA on TBS with the Hawks, and we moved it into a national package when we got the NBA overall, and putting it on TNT. So it was just being a part of an organization and learning from the best. I would say golden gut man in the business, which is Ted Turner. I learned from Ted more than anything else.
Well, that's exactly where I was going. I mean, I've been a huge fan of Ted Turner for so long. Talking about a visionary, all the great things that people are doing today, he was doing 40 years ago with the Superstation, with the Hawks,
Yep.
and the Braves.
The
What are a
Braves.
few things that you learned working for Ted?
It's a great question there, Alex. What I learned from Ted is this: you need to have a golden gut. You need to actually go with your gut. And yes, everybody can give you the data, and you should take the data and you should get the understanding and you should understand all the good, the bad, and the ugly. But at the end of the day, your gut's going to tell you whether you should do it or not. And I will tell you, a lot of Booz Allen's and consulting firms told Ted not to launch CNN, that no one would watch 24 hours of news. And, he did it anyhow.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so he thought things very differently. So, I live by that and I learned from that. And, I knew the only way we could do this deal was with CBS,
Mm.
Yeah.
right? And when we were negotiating with the NBA for all those years and dealing with David Stern and then Adam Silver, we had to come up with creative ways. Turner was always the underdog, right? It's easy for ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, and ESPN. Turner, we had to scrap harder and think outside the box, and figure out ways to work with them. The NBA, one of the ways we did that was when we formed NBA Digital, a profit sharing business with the NBA, and we helped develop League Pass and help build out all of their NBA digital products at the time. And that was a way for us to be different than our competitors that wouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, which was way ahead. I mean, Alex, you obviously know this intimately now, being in the NBA and WNBA business, but that obviously that League Pass was a game changer and so far ahead of its time. One of the things on the talent side, David, that we have to talk about because it has become so celebrated and oft imitated and never quite duplicated, which is the NBA on TNT. And, those four guys, that combination, everyone who's in our business, the business that all three of us are in, is constantly searching for that sort of holy grail. One of the most interesting stories I've heard about you is putting that massive piece that is known as Shaquille O'Neal into that mix. Tell us that story.
Well, first of all, I can't take credit for that show. That show happens on its own. It's magic in a bottle, and each piece is important piece of the puzzle, including the executive producer Tim Kiley, which I think without Tim Kiley, that show doesn't perform the way it performs today. But yes, we had Kenny, EJ, and Charles, and we won a bunch of Emmys
So
with
Kenny
them.
Smith, Ernie Johnson, and Charles Barkley, just
Yep,
for those who
yep.
aren't so well acquainted.
And they were Emmy Award winning. And we would rotate that fourth seat, whether it be Kobe Bryant sitting in it or whoever at the moment was most important at the time. And then Shaq retired. And everybody was like going after and figure out who can get Shaq. Um, and of course, ESPN at the time, and still today, I mean, you can see that the ESPN actually took the Inside the NBA show. So they knew they had a less superior product than what was airing on TNT. And I knew they were going to go after Shaq in a big way. And I knew they were going to pay him more. But my team really wanted him. And so we flew out to LA. But the uniqueness of that meeting was I didn't just bring the Turner Sports people. I brought Warner Brothers, the studio. I brought my True TV people because I knew he was in detectives and wanted to do maybe some unscripted type programming with them. I brought animation with me in case there was cartoons. We were talking about our whole company as a whole, and we were going to open up the moment for that. But the key line that I think you're talking about, Jason, is what was I going to open up with? And I couldn't figure it out until I was going up in the elevator. I walked in, we all shook hands, and I sat down and I said, Shaq, there are people that want you and there are people that need you. We don't need you. I already have an Emmy Award winning show. This is going to be a big risk for me, but I'm here with all these people because I want you. And I think you're going to be very successful. And he goes, never in my life have I heard anybody say they don't need me. So it was a very good opening line, and it's been memorialized many times. And Shaq always reminds me when I see him. He says, "I don't need you. I want you."
So,
So
David, that's the hot corner over there, all the way on the left. If you're watching the show, let's go to your first baseman, your anchor over here with Charles. Charles has told me, look, I tried to retire a few times, but David Levy wouldn't let me.
yeah,
He would come out to Arizona and bring me back. Why is Charles so magical on TV?
it's simple. It really is. It's authenticity.
Mm,
I mean, I would have owners calling me at night, weekends, and the same, I don't like what Charles saying, and I always said back, I said, is there anything he missaid from a standpoint of wrong? Is anything factually wrong? And if it was factually wrong, I could go back to Chuck and say, you are factually wrong. But I paid Chuck for opinions, and that's what he was giving, you know?
Yeah.
But authenticity is what makes him great, as well as and I mean this, you need a great ringleader, right? Ernie's one of the best ringleaders I know in the business. He would let conversations go and miss segments in his show if they needed to, and that was allowed
wow.
under my leadership and Tim Kiley, because great conversation should never be cut off. Most
Right.
studio people go, they're in this great conversation, and the host will say, "Listen, we'll get back to that later, but in the meantime, tomorrow night." So we don't let that. It wasn't part of our studio set, right? If it was a great conversation, we
Wow.
might
Yeah.
blow out commercials. Okay.
Yeah.
And the point was, you can't let great television not succeed, right? And not
Yeah.
be there for the consumer. So Ernie was the ringmaster, but he also, in case Charles ever got in trouble, which, we all know he's said a few lines that we all kind of raise our eyebrows to. Ernie may go back and say, Chuck, now just to make sure I'm clear, what you really meant was this. Right? You know, um, so he may catch, either Chuck or Kenny or Shaq in something and make sure that it was handled in a live television rather than the way social media attacks, some of the commentators today.
Yeah. So I have to say, as we're talking about talent, David, you're a star maker in a lot of ways, and one of the most fascinating things I've watched you do over the past few years is get deep into the business of pickleball. It is not something that I really saw coming. I think, Alex being I'm currently down here in South Florida as well. You can't go 20 feet without hearing or seeing a pickleball court. And yet it feels like it's at this catalytic moment with the participant game, the professional game. And I've kept an eye on it only because of the star power that you've been able to bring in. Former guest on this show, Maria Sharapova, I believe, was involved a couple years ago.
Yep.
You've got Andre Agassi coming back. Tell us what you think happens next with the game of pickleball and why it's essentially investable at this point.
Yeah. Well, let me start off by saying, 3 years ago, I started an agency with my partner, Chris Weil, and our other third partner, Bill Koenigsberg, a company called Horizon Sports and Experiences. And we wanted to build out a different type of sports marketing agency, one that would also invest in IP, create IP, and be a little bit unique in that space. And we wanted to focus on a few areas that we thought were white space 3 years ago. Women's sports, which obviously now everybody is understanding the ROI on what's happening on women's sports. We looked at Formula One and ways to get our clients into Formula One. We looked at racket sports, soccer and golf. So let's go into racket sports. Overall, we felt that tennis was going to be back on the rise, which I think you can obviously see from what's happening with the ratings again. And then we saw the rise of pickleball and the participation. But going back to my Turner days when I launched the match back in 2000, I think it was 18, Tiger versus Phil, $9 million, winner take all, pay-per-view golf event. Talk about being outside the box. That was about star power, right?
Yeah.
And so thinking like that and thinking about the pickleball space, I wasn't sure whether pickleball was going to be a televised sport, but I knew that I put the best brand names in racket sports. And the first one was Agassi and Roddick playing McEnroe and Chang. Okay. All slam winners, playing for $1 million purse live on ESPN at the Hard Rock Casino. I knew I'd have something because the participation was up and I had the brand names and it was authentic, right? People want to know that there's money on the line or something on the line. And so what's coming up in April is our fourth slam, believe it or not. And this time we're taking the number one pickleball player in the world. And if you're living under a rock, you don't know her, but her name is Anna Lee Waters. She just signed with Nike. Okay, so Nike did a deal with her. She signed with Franklin Rackets and she's won over 100 events. She's 19 years old, rock star, and she's playing with Jeannie Pichard, and they're playing against Agassi and James Blake. It's winner take all, men versus women, mano a mano, and there's no change in rules. There's no nothing. And it's $1 million purse. And this will be a real interesting event. It's going to be on primetime on ESPN on April 15th. I don't know whether pickleball in general is going to be a televised sport, but things like destination programming like this will be.
Yeah. All right, Alex, last question to you. You're batting cleanup here. What do
You
you
want to give me
got?
all right, David, we've spoken about this a little bit offline, but being a father of two girls that, like Jason said, are in two college powerhouses starting next year, for my rising freshman and my other one will be a senior. What is the future of college sports? How does it look like for you?
College athletics is going to be, it's almost like separating football and basketball out from the rest.
Yeah.
The NIL marketplace today is really changing college athletics to the point where there are athletes today that may consider not going pro and actually staying in school. And I saw that, and let's use your women side of the equation. The name eludes right now, but the number 2 pick in the WNBA draft last year was going to be a woman from Notre Dame. She was
Olivia Miles is the player you're talking about, I
Olivia
believe,
Miles.
David.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much. And she decided not to take the number 2 slot in the WNBA, number 2 pick. She decided to stay in school for a 5th year and then go into the transfer portal. So she didn't even stay at Notre Dame. She left and went to another school. I can see that. Listen, for the NBA, you're not in the first
Yeah.
round. If you're in the second round, you may make more money staying and have a better chance of getting better, possibly more recognized, staying in college and not take second round money. Now, I don't know if that's bad or good, to be honest with you. Maybe the NBA doesn't want these second round people coming out, right? And this is a way that they can mature more and become better players. I mean, you're seeing it right now, even at the college level for the high school. You have coaches like Rick Pitino publicly out saying, if you're a high school kid, don't call me. I'm not interested. Like, they can look in Division II, Division III schools and find maybe a better point guard. That's already been shown.
Think how much a young Alex Rodriguez could have made at Westminster
Oh, man.
Christian without
I mean,
ever even going to the
I
Seattle
don't got a
Mariners.
tear out for Alex. I don't have a tear out, but yeah. But yeah,
David, I needed an
made,
agent like you. I would have been just fine.
yeah.
Exactly.
Just to answer, to finish up, I think college has a big question mark on it. I think there's going to have to be some guardrails somewhere along the line. But right now, it's the wild, wild west. And if you can raise money and you can have your NIL and your rev share, schools like Ohio State and Michigan, they're going to continue to stay dominant because of money and revenue.
Dave, this was super fun. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it, Alex, Jason. Looking forward to it. Take care.
Thank you, David.